creatures that could be brought to life by man for their own purposes using inanimate materials is a concept that dates back to early biblical writings and Jewish folklore. One of the earliest literary works that utilized this concept was a novel by Mary Shelley published in 1818 called Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. The story revolves around a young man who manages to create life through an unorthodox experiment and is considered one of the earliest examples of science fiction. The novel subsequently became a subject for stage performances and a short film by Thomas Edison in 1910. By 1931, it was adapted into a feature-length film by Universal Pictures, which was instrumental in making Frankenstein one of the most famous movie monsters of all time, and launched the career of actor Boris Karloff, whose look for the feature creature remains the most iconic. A common misconception is that the name of the creature was Frankenstein, though that was actually just the name of the scientist responsible for him. Regardless, it's become standard for this particular monster design to be referred to as a Frankenstein. For Darkstalkers, the Frankenstein creature was given the name Victor von Gerdenheim, which serves as both an homage to the name of the scientist in the original novel and the creature's German origins. A number of different designs were originally submitted for Victor, ranging from those reminiscent of Universal's Frankenstein to those strictly robotic in design. According to Objects designer Mizuho Kageyama, within the game balance spectrum, Victor had to take up the role of an archetypical power-type fighter. In order to fill this role successfully, he was told Victor's moves would have to be more orthodox in nature, but that they could not be boring. His punches and kicks made his limbs enlarge to a point where they rip, and the muscular structure is exposed, something that tended to eat up resource limitations pretty quickly. According to Haruo Murata, Victor would have a younger sister, and he himself was as mentally innocent as a child. When a character like that is given superhuman powers, he believes it is easier for them to be corrupted. Before and after a match, Victor is often seen accompanied by his sister or the professor in the form of a ghostly apparition. Victor has a habit of sticking his fingers in his nostrils when attacking, which is explained as being a habit of the former owner to specific body parts. Having said that, the previous owner to Victor's butt apparently had the capacity to attack opponents and grab them between the cheeks. One of Victor's signature moves has him clutching an enemy and summoning the professor's ghost to electrocute them in a rhythmic fashion. This is such a spectacle that even his sister Emily shows up to get a close-up view of the proceedings. Professor Victor von Gerdenheim was once considered a gifted but dangerous man in the medical field due to his unethical practices. He studied and wrote many books based on his research of reviving dead cells and the boundaries between life and death. Fellow colleagues were not fond of the advancements he'd been making and began spreading false rumors about his personal life, resulting in the professor being forgotten by society and becoming more secluded. But it wasn't the fame or notoriety that drove Victor, but rather his research alone. Gathering the right materials and enough electrical power, the professor believed his research would allow him to create life. For decades, Victor devoted himself to his work, but the isolation slowly drove him further into madness. He first designed a prototype from human bodies and named her Emily, though she couldn't generate electricity by herself and could only be activated momentarily. For his next creation, named Victor, he would be able to generate and store electricity on his own through the bolt on his head, serving as an electrode. A total of 37 parts went into the construction of Victor's body, which resulted in an increased body size. On the stormy night the professor planned to bring his creation to life, he is struck by a bolt of lightning during the proceedings and dies immediately. Victor awakens to find his master unresponsive to his calls, which his childlike mind interprets as a sign of disapproval. Unaware of his master's demise, Victor leaves his castle home in Germany to become the strongest being in the world, in the hope that it will make his so-called father finally accept him. After combating many Darkstalkers, Victor returns to the professor's skeletal remains, where he meets his younger sister Emily, who had been reactivated. The two of them decide to leave their home behind and live out their lives together in peace. For many years, Victor had a happy and quiet life until Emily suddenly malfunctions and becomes unresponsive. Overcome with grief, Victor tries to revive Emily using the same lightning he once needed, but to no avail. One day, Victor hears the demon lord Jeddah calling the souls into his newly created dimension called the Majigan. Victor believes that by collecting the souls held captive therein, perhaps he can bring Emily back to life. Unfortunately, his pursuit proves to be in vain as it is unable to save Emily. In one final desperate attempt, Victor decides to transfer all of his energy to resuscitate her. Moments later, Emily finally awakens to find Victor lying by her side, motionless, yet seemingly content. Like many other characters in the Darkstalkers universe, Victor and Emily are seen as victims born into their circumstances. They were brought into the world as essentially two children without the luxury of a real home or a family. Victor and Emily had to always fend for themselves and could only ever find solace with each other. Much like the original Frankenstein, there is no one else for them to turn to, and the harsh reality is that neither of them can truly escape their fate of being unwanted to the rest of the world. Even as it is heavily implied that Victor sacrifices his life to save his sister, in the end, there is still no hope or salvation awaiting Emily on the other side. Despite Victor's interminable quest for strength in order to obtain approval or some sense of normalcy, he is ultimately powerless when it comes to changing either of their destinies.